One night in a small town, a girl threw a party and invited all her friends from school. There were many boys and girls, and late into the night, already deep into the morning, they started telling each other scary stories. One boy said he had heard the town legend about the old cemetery that was located near the girl's house. According to the legend, an old woman rumored to be a witch was buried in the middle of the cemetery. It was said that if you stood on her grave at midnight, she would drag you down with her. I never went near the cemetery after dark, said another boy. That's just a silly superstition. I can't believe you took that seriously. The girl who hosted the party laughed. The boy who told the story turned to her and grimaced. It's easy to be brave sitting safely in your own home. It's another thing when you're in the cemetery. It wouldn't make a difference, the girl said immediately. Well, then prove it, said the boy. We'll all go to the cemetery and wait outside while you go into the cemetery and stand on the witch's grave. Graves don't scare me, said the girl. I'll do it right now. The boy took a knife from the kitchen table and handed it to her. Stick this knife in the grave, he said, so we know for sure you were there. The teenagers went to the cemetery, and when they reached the iron gates, they stood in a semicircle. They all stared at the girl. She tried to pretend she wasn't afraid, while hoping they wouldn't see her trembling with fear. With the knife gripped tightly in her hand, the girl passed through the old iron gates and entered the dark cemetery. In the moonlight, the trees cast strange, troubling shadows over the rough gravestones. Eventually, she found the old woman's grave. There's nothing to be afraid of, the girl told herself. It's just a silly story. Crouching before the tombstone, she whispered, I'm not afraid of you. Then she raised the knife higher and stabbed it forcefully into the ground. Take that, old witch, she giggled. The girl was about to turn and head back when she felt someone grasping her from behind. She couldn't move. Something was holding the hem of her skirt and pulling back. Terror flooded through her. Help, she cried out. She's got me. When she didn't return, her friends started to worry. After some time, they went into the cemetery to look for her. They found her lying on the witch's grave. Her face was frozen in a scream of horror. She hadn't noticed she had stabbed the knife through her own skirt, pinning herself to the grave. That's what was holding her. The poor girl had been so frightened that her heart gave out, and she remained in the cemetery forever. On a cold February night, I was freezing at the bus stop on the highway. I was waiting for the last bus going to my neighborhood. The bus was supposed to arrive in about 5 minutes. I get on the bus, taking some change out of my pocket for the fare. The bus was empty, as it always is at this time. Only some guy sitting in the back and a woman napping with headphones in the middle of the bus. Following her example, I took out my headphones from my bag and dozed off as well. It's a 40-minute ride to my neighborhood and then another 20-minute walk. Suddenly, I woke up from a little jolt, looked around and was shocked. All the seats, except for one in the back, were taken. And some old lady was standing next to me. My mind was flooded with thoughts all at once. Where did all these passengers come from so late at night? Nevertheless, instead of the old lady, I decided to give up my seat and move, since you should help the elderly. I had just started getting up when the old lady pushes me and I fall back into the seat. She said with a hint of malice in her voice, "Sit, you have a long way to go, and I'm getting off soon." I was raised well, so I made a couple more attempts to give up my seat. Same reaction from her. Eventually, I got tired of sitting. I stood up very abruptly. The old lady gripped me tightly, trying to make me sit back down, but I sat her down in the chair myself and moved away. I decided to stand. The other passengers started looking at me with angry, barbed glares. Strange. The bus was driving to some unknown place, even though I should have been home already. There were no bus stops or landmarks, just forest and fields on both sides of the road. At this point, I started to realize something weird was going on. Lots of passengers this late, an unfamiliar road, a strange old lady. In the midst of these thoughts, all the passengers got up and moved toward the exit, or maybe towards me, since I was standing near the exit. The passengers surrounded me, crowding the exit area. Then some girl comes up to me and says, "It's our stop soon. Get ready to get off." At that moment, a blue sign flashed by the window. It said, "Cemetery." I became frightened. My gaze fell on the emergency hammer used to break windows in case of an accident. Come what may, I thought, and hit the window with all my might. The glass shattered into pieces. Not wasting a minute, I jumped out the window. Instead of the expected blow to the head, everything spun around. I flew up, then fell onto something soft. I opened my eyes and saw I was in a hospital room with 2 IV drips. Turns out I had been in an accident entering the city. My bus collided with an intercity bus. Both went off a cliff. 2 minutes later, a fire broke out. I was the only survivor. I guess the passengers I was with going to the cemetery were from the intercity bus, and that strange old lady didn't want to let me out for some reason. I don't know why she acted that way. I was found at the accident site 10 meters from the bus. I had multiple injuries and fractures, but was still alive. I was clutching a red hammer in my hand,